these pieces together, this shed was found in the field that it killed him in.
Hey there, I'm Steve Pinkston for Lone Wolf Custom Gear and Hardcore E-Cycles. And when Justin asked me if I'd like to do a segment for shed hunting, I kind of was wondering if he had enough time. Because shed hunting to me has been a long time passion. It's really become a big part of my strategy when it comes to chasing deer, and in my case it's specific deer. This particular buck, for example, was a deer that I chased for 3 seasons, and I actually managed to pick up sheds from him. Matter of fact, this is a very memorable moment for me because they were laying side by side, and I just sat down and gazed at them for a few minutes before I even put my hands on them. It was pretty cool to find these. But this buck was extremely elusive. I had a real hard time pinning him down. Obviously a pretty good sized buck. But the year that I found these sheds, it really helped me put a final piece to the puzzle, so to speak. Where I found them is actually about 150 feet from where I actually killed him, which that may not always be the case, but it put a final pin in it for me when it comes to where to hunt him, so to speak. It was a late season hunt for me, and I knew he was working a food source, and that food source is very key when it comes to hunting sheds as well. So in this particular case, where I found these sheds was late season, and where I was that time of year hunting this particular buck that year was late season as well. So it really gave me a clue as to where this deer might be laying down, and I ended up actually killing him in a food plot that I set up specifically for him. Not that I didn't try to kill him all year and through October and November, I just never had a chance, but I did end up getting him late season, and a lot of it had to do with finding these sheds. And the year before, I actually found the other set as well. They're gnarled up. I didn't find them as early as I did these, but I've got 2 sets of sheds to this buck. Well, I don't really know where to start on this particular buck because I chased this deer for a long time. I got a lot of history with him. He got a pass from me a couple times. He's provided some incredible video where I slipped up on him in a bean field. I actually nicknamed him Big Guy accidentally whenever I was literally just 5 feet from him when he was laying in a bean field one time. And he scared me. I was so close to him, and when he jumped up and took off, it was just an incredible experience. But the history of this buck goes back 4 seasons. This was the previous year's sheds right here. He was actually a 5x4. That's the first time he deviated from a straight up 4x4 8. The year before, I had a close encounter with him, and I misjudged him actually, and I think destiny was in play here because I'm glad I didn't kill him. He wasn't anywhere near as big as I actually thought that he was at the time. Took me a while to find the sheds. My daughter actually helped me find this particular one. As you can see, it's eaten up a little bit, but my daughter Hannah is quite the shed partner, and my whole family's gotten involved with it. My daughter Allie and my wife. A lot of fun getting sheds out and talking about memories. But the year before, he was just a youngin', but you could see he had some potential. He had great brow tines and nice tine length. Knew he was going to be a good deer. So the year that I had the encounter with him, I really rode past a scrape on my bike, and it was a big scrape, size of the hood of your truck, and I knew right away that it was probably one of the bigger deer on the farm, which I thought was him. And I hung the lone wolf right there, 35 yards from it. And as he has done in the past, this particular deer liked to get out in the open. And I picked him off in the open and started filming him. And he literally was approaching like I had him on a fishing line. And I positioned my feet to move to kill him. And a doe busted me that was right underneath me and I didn't see. And my ears aren't the best these days, and I never heard her. And anyway, he got the best of me that day. The next year, he had a buddy, a sidekick, that was pretty close to the same size, and I ended up getting a shot at him at the exact same location that I ended up killing this deer this past season. This is my 2021 buck, and I got tons of pictures, tons of video, tons of history with this deer. Very special deer. If you're not a shed hunter, this might be something that would that you think about to get into it, because the history that you have and the memories that you generate when you can say, okay, this came off of this particular buck. I mean, think there's any question that's that deer's antler. Just an incredible likeness. And you can do that with all of them, actually. His antlers just, he had that tine, the brow tine, that just made it very similar. Even right to when he was probably 2.5-year-old, maybe, something like that. I'm not really sure what his age was at that time, but, and I'm not the best at judging the age, but you can see the similarities. It's just so much fun to be able to have that history as a conversation point. Not to mention, it's great to do with your family, and it also helps you put the puzzle together to finish the deal. This particular buck, all these sheds I found in different areas, it just basically lays out on a map and showed me his entire travel pattern. And I killed him on one of those travel patterns, actually. I didn't know he was there that particular afternoon. I set up basically to find him, and he walked right to me that afternoon, which was really cool. I got to share it with a couple friends on the recovery, and you'll see that on a Whitetail Addictions episode. But if you're not into shed hunting, you're missing something. You got to really get into it and get the exercise in the spring, and who knows, maybe you'll find your next target. Well, this particular buck, this is my best typical. He grosses a pretty big number. In another 3-year chase. The first year I was actually interested in him, I ended up getting this shed, which showed me that he had some serious genetic potential. He really wasn't anywhere close to where I killed him, so I can't say that this particular shed, put me on him, so to speak. He was a very difficult deer for me to get close to. I could get some video and pictures of him, but I didn't have access to where he lived, and that made it really difficult for me on this particular buck. The year that I found this shed, this is an interesting story. He shed this side this particular year very early. It was like the last week of December, and I was reluctant to go chase that shed because I wanted both of them, and I just couldn't get in there because he kept walking around with this one on his side. He ended up carrying this shed almost to St. Patrick's Day, clear into March. And when he finally dropped it, I went searching for both of them, and I was not able to come up with either one of them. Very frustrating for me as this one went. This buck was really challenging for me. The next season, on opening day that I went to hunt this deer, I had a good wind and I had a travel core to hunt this deer on. I stayed in a stand, got dark, didn't see anything. I'm walking out, I caught this picture right here as I was walking out in weeds about this tall, and this shed was laying there. I was like, I knew I was on pay dirt whenever I found that shed. And this is very, very near and dear to me, frankly, because this buck was such a challenge to kill. I chased him that entire year. I had a friend of mine tell me about him in a CRP field that was almost a mile away. He was with a doe that day, and I obtained permission very quick to hunt the deer. And I got in there while the deer was chasing a doe. I actually got pictures of him mounting a doe. I kept creeping on him, and the doe finally busted me when I was about 30 yards away, and I was full draw on him. But he was facing away from me at the beginning of that, and then when the doe busted me, he spun around and he was facing me, and I didn't make a very good shot. I chose to shoot at him because I chased him so long, and I hit him in front, and he dropped down, and he got back up and ran, and I looked for the deer for 3 weeks, somewhere in that vicinity, didn't find him. Pretty much hung my bow up for the year. I wasn't going to hunt anymore, and I threw my cameras out everywhere trying to find him. And the place I found this shed, I got a picture of him, and he was coming through on his way to a bean field that was cut, and I set up in there several times, never could catch him. All the pictures I ever got of him were after dark, and the last day of gun season, in the second season that year, I decided there were a lot of guys hunting that other side where this deer actually was coming from, and I decided I'd get in that tree and just on the hopes that maybe they might run him out of there. Well, 20 minutes before legal shooting time, I heard shots over there, and I'm sitting in a tree with a bow, and the shots kept coming, and I was like, what the heck's going on? It sounds like a war zone over there. It was a public hunting area, and all of a sudden I looked across the field, and this rack was coming, and he was limping really bad where I had shot him, and here he comes right toward me. I had picked a location to hang a tree stand that day where there was a low spot in the fence, thinking that he was injured, because back in this day when I killed this deer, we used a product called a Wildlife Eye. It was video. It's kind of a dinosaur these days. But anyway, he comes across the field, and he gets halfway across the field, and a great big 8-point that I had been seeing also comes running across the field and comes first. And he comes across, and he goes behind me downwind, and I thought sure that the party was completely over. But he walked real close to my tree, right under me, did not breeze me. Wind was going just that direction. This buck jumped the fence, walked over the fence basically, and I killed him at 10 yards. This is by far one of the most special bucks I've got. This was a 3-year trip trying to kill this deer, and I'm really happy with this buck, and this shed had a lot to do with it. Okay, this 8-point, another just awesome deer that I've had a couple years history with, but finding these sheds put the pin in the location that I would eventually kill him. This particular buck I've known for 4 seasons, only interested in really the last 2, and I was blessed to have another buck that I was close enough to that I got after the year that he wore these. But I was after him specifically this particular year, and he avoided me all through November, October. I had no opportunities at him. I saw him a few times, but I never had anything close. These sheds were laying in a wheat field. Actually, I should say this shed was laying in a wheat field, actually about 100 feet from where I killed the deer. This one was almost a mile away, and I didn't find it until late March, and fortunately it wasn't torn up. It was in good shape. And but anyway, this particular buck I chased the entire year, never got close to. I had a friend in town, Troy Poniger as a matter of fact, and as I was spending time with Troy, I came by this location, and he was actually browsing in the field that I found this shed in. And I sat and watched him for the last hour of daylight, and I took my lone wolf gear the next afternoon. The only thing I could get into there was a pine tree, and you know how these pine trees are. This thing was just a mess. I got in there, I cut as few limbs as I could. I was very cramped up sitting, but I knew that I may have an opportunity at him because it was the same wind conditions as the night before. And sure enough, right as basically you could have set your watch by him, he strolled out of there and walked right into that wheat field, and I drilled him right there, and I was able to celebrate that with a couple friends. And this particular buck, this shed right here is what put the pin on the location where I killed him that year. Again, it was late season, it was January, and when you're shed hunting, you're looking for food sources and travel corridors. That's what you're after. You may not find an antler like the same place you see the deer in August, September, October, November, but you can bet that the food source, that's where you're most likely to find your sheds.